So it looks like the last episode was actually fine. I went back and I looked at the video and hopefully it is not cut off. But we are gonna pick up where we left off there and just dive right in. Okay, so we just got the information on the unregistered espers, which I don't like at all. It feels very like uh, uh non-consensual, let's put it that way. But for all we know, he was just going to keep shouting without doing anything else. Everyone always assumes unregistered espers are up to something nefarious. He looked like he needed a bath and a hot meal. I don't think he was out to hurt people. He held up his hands, laughing. Okay. He was a harmless, drug-riddled, homeless esper. Got it. I like this guy. He's a little flirty, he's a little sarcastic, but not like a total jerk. I didn't say he was harmless either. I just don't think it's fair to make assumptions about what he was going to do. So, what is your plan then, MC? To wait until he does something to you that you don't like and that's potentially harmful before you choose to react? I mean, there's a fine line between not being judgmental, but also not being ignorant. Everyone has their own circumstances. Well, that's true in any case. It seems like you were saved by the fountain falling apart, huh? I shifted my eyes awkwardly to the side. Yeah, that. A shame, since I was about to come to your rescue myself. And here my heroics are, completely foiled by crumbling infrastructure. I gave him an exasperated look. But I was glad he was going to assume that was crumbling infrastructure. It's been a while since I did something like that. Okay, I remember this. Anyway, I'm Jack Fisker. Okay, I like it. I snapped back to reality when the man introduced himself. I should probably apologize for dragging you away like that, but it seemed like the best thing to do at the time, especially with the public safety idiots descending on us. Are you sure you're all right? Oh, I'm okay. Like I said, he didn't hurt me or anything. I was just a bit startled. That's good at least. And I didn't get your name. Oh, sorry, it's Nikki. Like I said, a bit startled. Now that I was less distracted by everything else, I realized there was something about the way he spoke. A faint accent. It wasn't all that noticeable at first, but now that I was paying attention, I started to hear it. Delphine? Okay, and Delphine is on the night side, so what is he doing here? That's what it sounded like to me, but he either hadn't lived there in a while or he was trying to cover it up. I mean, it wasn't that strange. You just didn't meet people from there every day here in Cecilis. With relations between the countries so bad at the moment, it was pretty difficult for anyone to get a passport into Cecilis these days. Okay, so yeah, the relations between the day and night sides are contentious. I wonder if I should ask about it. Everything okay there? Oh, sorry, got a bit lost in thought. Comment on his accent and ask where he's from, or keep the observation about his accent to yourself. Okay, here's the thing. If he's trying to hide it, right? I don't think he would take too kindly to us just straight out asking him. And on top of that, we just met this guy. Like we've exchanged what, like a handful of sentences with him. I don't think it's really appropriate for us to just come right on out and be like, "Hey, I noticed you have an accent. Where are you from?" Like we don't know him like that yet. So let's keep the observation about his accent to ourselves. I decided to keep that observation to myself. There was absolutely nothing wrong with someone from Delphine being in Cecilis, but with all the tension these days, I knew there were some people that could be a little weird about it. Even if I actually wanted to travel there myself, even though I would have loved to have a conversation with him about Delphine, I didn't want to make him feel self-conscious or awkward either. Yeah, see, exactly. Like, once you get to know him a little better, I feel like that's appropriate. But I feel like it's the same way with really anything that, could be a little more personal or could open up Pandora's box when you don't really know what significance that has in their life. The accent was faint anyway, so I could be mistaken. Anyway, I should probably be getting home. After that little display, I definitely lost all motivation to be in public. Is that where you're headed before you got roped into that crowd? Dinner, actually, but I think I may just get takeout. Not really feeling the whole social engagement thing at the moment. Want an escort home then? What a gentleman! That's so cute! Okay. I glanced back at the opening of the alley. I had no idea if they'd caught that man, but it wasn't like I was really worried he might come after me, and I didn't know Jack either. I mean, it's my apartment. I can get back alone. I didn't expect that you might get lost, Butterfly. Though I've known some people who are pretty bad with directions, I was more worried about your safety. I can't figure out. I'm not sure if I like that nickname or not, Butterfly. I like butterflies, but like you can tell he thinks he's pretty smooth. Like he just met her and he's already calling her Butterfly. Okay. It's Cecilus though, which is like any other city. It's sometimes safe, sometimes not. I'm not going to force you, it was just an offer. Weren't you headed somewhere else too? Nowhere important. I don't know why, but that just strikes me as shady. You know what I'm saying? Like that's very vague considering how open he's been up until this point. I chewed my lip uncertainly. I didn't want him to go out of his way, but company would be kind of nice. I'm that way. I indicated the general direction of my flat. Even better. That's the direction I was heading anyway. Uh-huh, I'm sure it was. Are you sure you don't mind? Jack laughed and took my arm, steering me in the direction I pointed. You always worry this much about imposing on people? Don't get me wrong, it's cute, but it must be pretty exhausting. Not always. It's just that I'm not in the habit of having strangers walk me home. I assume you're also not in the habit of being yelled at by fountain-dwelling, Shakespeare-reciting weirdos. Okay, that was Shakespeare? Okay. That explains, like, the purple prose rhyming. Huh. Oh, you recognize that quote? Jack gave me an appreciative look. I'm more surprised you did. Ancient Earth literature isn't exactly most people's forte. Well, I've taken a lot of history courses, and I like learning about Earth. Earth, the third planet of a rather ordinary yellow star. I shook a finger at the air, mimicking one of my professors as I spoke. The planet that birthed our people and sheltered our kind for millions of years. The mother world of us all. Now millions of light years away, but forever engraved into our genetic code and history. Jack laughed at my little performance. The tension from the previous incident began to drain away as we walked together. They really teach it that way? Some of them do, but I actually do find it pretty fascinating. I mean, it's part of our history. It's nice to learn about them. What about you? Why do you recognize Shakespeare? Also studying history? Jack smirked and shook his head. Do I look like a student to you? Well, I don't know. I don't know what a student's supposed to look like. I didn't want to assume. So I don't look like a student? I shrugged. He didn't, to be totally honest. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of variety as far as the people that are students. A student doesn't look a certain way. But maybe it's different in their reality. He had the air of someone who had already been out in the world experiencing things, not locked away, desperately burying their head in a book so they could try to achieve the next tier or pass the next exam. Yeah, but he could be like a non-traditional student, you just don't know. I just know some dork who's always got a book glued to his face when he's not otherwise occupied. Somehow he managed to trick me into reading here and there. Sounds like a good friend, though I worry a little if you actually had to be tricked into reading. It's a fairly basic skill, you know. Here's some of the snark that we got from Changeling with Nora. We can see it a little in this MC as well. Oh, I don't mind reading. I just have other skills I prefer to focus on. She's being such an elitist. I don't like that. That's not nice. MC, be nice. Everybody has different hobbies. Anyway, so your friend likes to read? That was so mean. Jack seemed highly amused that I ignored yet another obvious attempt to flirt. That was an attempt to flirt? What did I miss there? Oh, okay. I totally misread that interaction. Got it. Um, yeah, he's a pretty good guy, though I think a lot of people might disagree. Well, that's odd for you to say that about someone that you claim is your friend and that you think is a pretty good guy. Interpersonal relationships aren't really built on the opinions of other people. If he's a good guy to you, that's all that matters. Okay, I have to take issue with that. Um there's this saying where, like, you know, it's like if you go on a date and the person that you're dating is nice to you but is like a jerk to the waiter, that's not a nice person. I strongly believe that in like a lot of different situations, right? If you have someone that is like nice to you but that is like an absolute raging jerk to everybody else, that doesn't mean that you're just like shrug your shoulders and you're like, oh, it's okay if they're, you know, a miserable human being to every other thing in existence besides me. Like, I don't like that. Learned that in one of your classes too. I lifted my chin, giving him a look of mock offense. I learned it on my own, thank you very much. He just laughed again. It was kind of nice having an interaction that had nothing to do with classes or studying. And that wasn't just a family member. It felt like it had been a while. Oh, does MC not have any friends? We walked quietly for a while, and soon my building was a little ways away, so I stopped and gave Jack a grateful smile. Thank you for walking me back. I appreciate it. No problem. I was coming this way anyhow. Already said so. So, goodbye then? Looks like. Well, maybe I'll see you around again sometime. I hope so. Goodbyes were awkward usually, but Jack didn't drag things out. He grinned and turned around, heading back the way he'd come. Hey, I thought you just said you were walking this way anyhow. our first CG of Jack. Our first CG of one of the boys. Okay, we've got to look at this. I love his hair and his ear piercings. I'm sorry. I have a thing where, like, I've always wanted to have blue hair, and because I have black hair, that's really not feasible for me, like naturally black hair, but I've always wanted blue hair. I lied. He smirked before striding away without giving me the chance to respond. Okay, that was pretty cool. I watched him for a moment before I finally went back to my flat. What a strange evening, and now I still needed to figure out dinner. Wonderful. Ooh, what is this? Paladin? Griffin, Paladin, where are you? Standing by. Target located. Can confirm telekinesis. Oh, that's right. I totally skimmed over this. So MC, we've already gotten sort of this suggestion that MC caused the fountain to crack, right? So I'm assuming that she is some sort of unregistered Esper. Especially, and that would make sense too, given how defensive she was being of like the homeless. I shouldn't say homeless. We don't know his situation. But the guy in the fountain that almost attacked her, how she was like so defensive of him when Jack was like, you know, being maybe a little critical. Um, which is interesting for a couple different reasons. One of the things that always struck me about this when I played the demo initially is that so her ex-boyfriend was this guy who was interested in studying espers, right? And then she's an esper. So wouldn't that create a little bit of a conflict of interest? Like, you know what I mean? I mean, I would feel if I was MC, I would feel very uncomfortable dating someone whose career aspirations were to study people like me. You know? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Was Merlin right? I'm assuming the guy in the fountain was Merlin. Probably. What next? Contact Ivory Tower. Merlin will make the call. Okay, maybe that's not who Merlin was. I don't know. Alright, understood. Paladin. Other factions are moving in. I think I saw Jack. Okay, other factions. That wording, I'm assuming that is referring to like Crimson and Endgame. Are you sure? Oh, Jackal. I'm assuming Jackal is Jack, which means Jack is either part of Crimson or Endgame. I'm not sure, damn it. Understood, will advise soon. End communication. So can we see anything else about, okay, contacts, calendar, album, replay, news, mail, messages. Yeah, so I don't see anything that could tell us any more about what the heck that was. I lay on my bed staring up the ceiling, unable to sleep. I kept replaying the evening's events, that man, his face, that look in his eyes as he looked at me, the way the fountain broke like that. I rolled over, trying to find a comfortable spot to no avail. I flipped my pillow over, pressing my face against the cool fabric, but it didn't help at all. Somehow I felt strange, feverish. It had been a while since something like that had happened, and it had never happened out in public before, though I suppose I didn't usually have that frightening an experience in public either. Ugh, I just wanted to stop thinking about it. I finally flopped on my back, staring at the ceiling. Query. There was a little chime in my head, acknowledging the command. Cross-reference Shakespeare and Merry Wonder of the Night. Information flitted through my head, and a soft ping alerted me that the search had found something. Transfer to display. I rolled over and picked up the display screen from my table as I propped myself up on my elbows. My eyes narrowed slightly as I read the writing there. A Midsummer Night's Dream. That's what the name of that play was. Okay, I don't know how many other people had to read that in I can't remember if I was in I think I was in high school. I f- I hated that book, okay? And here's the I'm gonna be the first one to say it. I think there were some Shakespeare references in Changeling too. Shakespeare had some great lines, okay? He had a way with words, he had some great lines, but if you look at the actual, like for example, Romeo and Juliet, that was absolutely like just no. They knew I before I really read Romeo and Juliet, I was like, "Oh, it's so romantic. It's so great." And then I found out that they were like two teenagers that only knew each other for like 3 days and barely spoke to each other. Um it's that it just sort of ruined it for me. So, I think Shakespeare has some great lines, but I think a lot of it is definitely hype. Let me put it that way. Okay. It had been such a long time since we'd covered Shakespeare. Tatiana. Wait, Titania? Titania? A queen of fairies. Anxiety stirred in the pit of my stomach again. So, was he calling her the queen of fairies? As in Esper ranked fairies or something? Fairy espers. I didn't know much about them except that their genetic markers and brain structure were a bit different from the norm. And queens were one of the top ranked espers. Okay, we're gonna read about this, and then I am gonna jump back to reading about fairy espers because I saw when I was editing my last video that I skipped over the definition for fairy espers, and I have a feeling that's gonna be really important later down the road. Okay, so esper ranks. The official rankings used by Endgame and subsequently everyone else are modeled off chess pieces. Oh, that's so cool. I I kind of like chess. Though most people have simply come to accept the vernacular, the reason usually given for the whimsical labels is just that the founder of the organization was both eccentric and a particular fan of chess. The lowest level of espers is the infantry classification, but they are sometimes referred to as unranked. They score anywhere from a 3 to 7.9 on the EA scale and are the most common esper type. Low-level infantry are on the lower end of this range, with scores of 3 to 4.5. Mid-level infantry score between 4.5 to 5.9, and upper-level infantry are 6 to 7.9. Espers that score 8 or higher on the EA scale typically begin to develop specialized abilities that allow them to acquire an official named rank. Nearly all espers have a range of abilities that fall loosely into similar categories. These categories or ranks are Rook, King, Bishop, Rook, Knight, Bishop, King, and Queen. Okay, those are all chess pieces. Though nearly all espers have some form of clairvoyant awareness and telekinesis, Each rank has a unique set of traits common to the espers who fall into that category. Rooks are the most common ranked esper, followed by knights, then bishops. Kings and queens are the least common esper types. You know what? This is really cool too because in chess, the queen, even though the king is right the piece that you have to sort of protect above or all else, otherwise you lose the game. The queen is considered the most powerful piece, right? Because she can move pretty much in any direction and any number of spaces. And looking at the fact that the queen ranked espers um in this world are stronger than slightly stronger than the king rank, I think that's a cool parallel. While nano espers follow fairly rigid ability types and skill sets based on rank, that is not true for fairy or F class espers. They often possess unique attributes that don't strictly align to this ranking method, though there are often some similarities that allow for loose classification using this system. Thus, you might have an F class knight or an F class bishop. The fairy phenomenon is still relatively newly discovered, and eventually there may be espers whose abilities are so far outside the usual range they require a entirely new level of classification system. Huh. Okay, so let's go back to reading about the fairy espers. Um. Okay, so it looks like it's divided by groups and factions, places, technology, espers, and then world and society. Okay, so fairies, also referred to as F class, are the result of a natural mutation that occurs in humans rather than changes initiated by the original nanite infection of the first colonists. They were first discovered nearly 30 Arcadian years ago. Okay, so this is really recent then, in terms of, societal change. But were only made public about 15 years ago. It's unclear how long they've been around or when the first fairies began to show up. Their abilities work differently than nano espers, and there is still relatively little known about them since they can more easily escape detection. Their abilities fall outside the current ranking system used by Endgame to classify other espers. While the same rankings are still applied, they often have ab- aberrations in their skill sets or the sheer scale of their abilities. Fairies are also known to be more affected by their emotions when using their abilities and thus are considered somewhat less stable than nano espers. Okay, that's interesting in the context of what just happened with MC, right? Because like she got scared and that's why the fountain broke. So the implication I think is that she's a fairy esper and not like a nano esper. All right. Pull up Earth mythology on the topic of fairies. I flicked the light on and sat up in bed, wondering if I should make myself some tea. That's actually what I'm drinking right now, MC. I prefer coffee, but I've already had a large cup of coffee, so I'm trying not to have too much today. If I couldn't sleep, I might as well stay up and read for a while. I tried my best to drown the anxieties by immersing myself in the ancient stories of a world millions of light years away and thousands of years old. I don't know how long I read before I finally set the display aside and went to sleep. Common Route Chapter 2, Captured Queen. Okay, well, if that's not foreshadowing, I don't know what else is. Let me just check the time real quick. Okay, we're still doing good on the time. Wow. It's such a different experience reading out these episodes versus um like verbally reading it out versus reading it silently on my own. It's such so much longer. Anyway, morning came way too soon. I didn't have to be up early, but my brain was trained to wake at a specific hour. Even without my alarm, my eyes popped open an hour after daylight. I was just lucky I didn't have to actually get up and go to class. I rolled over for the 20th time, mashing my face into the pillow in the hopes I would suffocate myself back to sleep. Or maybe just in a coma. Either one's good. I wasn't picky. Gah. I lifted my head and glared at the display on my bedside table. I'd stayed up far too late reading about Earth's fairy mythology. It had been a pretty fascinating read, really. But as I flopped onto my back, throwing an arm across my eyes to block out the daylight, I was definitely doubting the decision to stay up until who knows when. 0400 hadn't been the best time. Is that supposed to be 0400 or just 4 o'clock? Hadn't been the best time for reading, but it had gotten my mind off the evening's events prior to that, and that had been kind of the point. So it probably hadn't been a good idea when I was going to wake up at 7. I finally gave up and rolled out of bed with another groan. I'd just have to catch a nap later on. Might as well just throw my entire sleep schedule out when I'm at it. I yawned as I stumbled to the kitchen for a glass of water. Because I still didn't have anything else in the house. Oh, that's right, we didn't get any grocery shopping done last night. Last night had too many distractions. I'd been too freaked out to place an order for groceries, which meant the kitchen was still empty. And a quick check confirmed all the morning slots were already taken. Wow, a lot of people like having groceries delivered because it was the same situation last night. Huh, okay. That meant going shopping in person even though I didn't really want to. I turned on the news as I leaned against the counter and yawned into my glass of water. A woman's face fuzzed into view, hovering over the image from last night. The image was of the broken fountain basin, mostly drained of water. Several officers stood around it, talking to one another and members of the crowd. The anchor began to discuss the young woman nearly assaulted in front of the stunned onlookers, and heat crept into my face as they showed footage of the man leaping at a blurred out and censored figure I knew to be myself. Just the image of myself I wanted to wake up to. At least they edited out my body. Even so. So did they not see her face then? Was like her back to the camera? Or did they not realize that she was the reason behind the basin cracking, you know? Because I would think that if they had put 2 and 2 together, they would be, at her door already. I set the glass down and pulled up a visual of any messages received while I slept, and sure enough, there were 2 from the safety department. One was a response to my report, or rather, a notification to let me know I sent it. As if I hadn't been present when I, sent it. The other was a notification identifying me as a witness and requesting me to come at my earliest convenience to answer some questions in person. There was no convenient time for this, but I should probably get it over with as soon as I could. Looks like that'll be how I spend my afternoon. Hopefully they won't need to ask too much. There was footage of everything that happened. What more could I add? Besides the whole part where I was pretty sure I destroyed public property with my mind on accident. Because I wasn't going to be bringing that up anytime soon. I closed the interface and frowned at the news report, catching the tail end. Weirdly, they didn't discuss the fact of the man in the fountain being an Esper. An unregistered Esper would normally have been a bigger deal. Maybe it was for the best, though. It's not as if his behavior was due to being an Esper, but that would have been the inevitable slant, even though he'd clearly been on something. Okay, so it sounds like there's some sort of stigma against the Espers. I didn't pick up on that. I just thought it was sort of this stigma against the AIs, but it sounds like it's against AIs and Espers as well. Usually, they'd have taken every chance to sensationalize the danger of unregistered Espers. As it was, they were pinning it all on drug use and suggesting it was evidence of another small crime ring in the city related to Crimson. Then again, they like to pin nearly everything on Crimson. If you believed the news networks, every crime in Delphine had its roots in Crimson, and the organization had its claws pretty deep in New Albion as well. It's kind of funny how the news is very similar to how the news operates in the real world. Very sensationalized, very sort of biased and slanted. Never thought I'd be grateful to Crimson for being so horrible they took attention off other issues. Because if the media was keeping Espers out of the story, it hopefully was an indication the safety department was thinking along similar lines. I didn't want to have to lie to anyone. I was awful at it anyway. Hopefully, one interview was all they would need. It wasn't like anything terrible had happened to me. I didn't want to make a bigger deal of it than was necessary. I'm getting flashbacks to Change Thing with Nora. I can't tell you how many times she says this line. And I'm sorry, that is one thing to the developers that drove me absolutely crazy. I get it. in terms of her not wanting to reveal her powers because it could potentially limit a lot of her choices in life. That's completely understandable. But in terms of this whole sentence of being like, "Oh, I don't want to make a bigger deal of it than necessary." Like, if you are really powerful, which we don't know if she is or not yet, right? But if she is, and she doesn't know how to control her powers, and potentially like they're triggered by something as simple as just becoming emotional, right? Which is very human, very natural, but it's not something you can control or plan for. Realistically, she needs to be looking into some way of controlling and, learning more about these powers instead of just trying to pretend like it doesn't exist. Like, I'm sorry, I'm having flashbacks to Changeling, and that just drives me absolutely insane. And it was more believable for Nora because Nora was a teenager, right? She was a teenage girl who really just didn't want to deal with a lot of what had been going on because of the reception that she received when she was a kid, and everything happened. But like her, like, come on, MC, you know this is a big deal. Stop it. Stop it. If they expected me to agree to press charges, they were going to be disappointed. I just wanted him to get some help. I didn't want to get him into trouble, though I guess that was inevitable regardless of what I did. I bit back another yawn. If I didn't hurry and get the shopping done, I'd run out of time, but there was still an opportunity for late brunch if I could beat the crowds this morning. This time I'll just stick close to home though. There was a grocer at the end of the block, and they had a hydroponic garden so you could pick your own produce, which is fantastic. Well, that sounds pretty cool. Okay, so I do think I'm gonna end this episode here. We got to meet at least one of the guys this time, right? We got to meet Jack. And I do like him. I'll be honest, I can't really get a read on him yet. Like he definitely strikes me as like the flirty, sort of, relaxed, slightly sarcastic type, which is cool. But I am interested to learn what his sort of relationship is to Delphine and potentially Crimson, right? Because Delphine is on the night side, and that's where Crimson is as well, I think. But yeah, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and I will see you next time.